guys, I hope that you had a good Christmas or whatever other holiday you might celebrate. I hope you had a good time, or if you don't celebrate, I hope you enjoyed time off of work or school, and if you had to be around people that you can avoid the rest of the year, I hope that the time wasn't too unpleasant. So, as most everyone does, I like to watch Christmas themed films around Christmas time, and I chose to watch a film I haven't seen before, which is Rare Exports. It's a 2010 Finnish film, and I've never watched a Finnish film before, so this was a bit of a different experience as well. So the plot is it's not complicated, but it's a little weird, but this is a horror fantasy thriller, but in my opinion, it's not, except for a few parts, it's not really a horror film. It's more like a children's fantasy film with some horror elements in it, but I'll get into that. So the plot follows a young boy named Pietri and his friend Juuso. I believe that's how it's pronounced. Like I said, I've never watched Finnish, and I don't know Finnish, so my pronunciation will be terrible. They have snuck into this excavation site on a mountain. They live near this mountain in a village. And a team of scientists and men are excavating the mountain, and they snuck in to check it out. And they discovered that the mountain is actually a large burial mound, and there is a massive grave that they're trying to unearth a ancient creature from. And of course, little by the film, as it goes along, we find out that this creature is Santa Claus. Pietri starts to do a little research about, he's a young boy, about this the darker mythology of Santa Claus, because it's not the Santa Claus that most of us, the character that most of us know or are familiar with. It's a little darker than that. The village that Pietri lives in that's near the mountain is a village of reindeer herders and butchers. Around this time, reindeer herds start to come in from the mountain, and that's when the men in the village go and gather them up to make, because that's how the village, most of them in the village make money, earn their living. But only a few scrawny reindeer come in, and the massive herds that they're used to are nowhere to be found. So they go to investigate closer to the mountain, but the mountain is gated off because of the, like I said, the excavation and scientific research going on. They discover hundreds of partially eaten and dead reindeer. And they're puzzled as to why this has happened. They think it's wolves, but they're not sure. But it's definitely, all these reindeer are dead. Soon after this, Pietri's father had set up a wolf trap because there are wolves near the village, and he's caught something. And it looks like a very tall old man with a white beard and white hair, but he doesn't really act or seem human. There's something off about this almost it's like a creature about this being. And also around that time, other livestock has been eaten or disappeared. Children around the village have started to disappear, and different supplies around the village, like heating supplies, have started to disappear. So all these weird things are happening. And Pietri has a feeling that it's what the scientists are unearthing is what's causing this. But of course, nobody listens to him until a little later on in the film. And it kind of builds up to a conflict between the men of the village and these creatures, or these beings, mythical beings. And I don't want to give too much away because I feel like describing too much of the plot, will kind of ruin a bit of the surprise about it. So a few things about this film. Like I was saying earlier, I definitely don't view it as a horror film, except for, of course, the massive killing of the reindeer, like the after effects that you see. and there's I think 1 or 2 kills in it. There's really nothing horror about this. It's more like a darker children's film, except for the copious amounts of old full frontal male nudity that we are treated to a few different times in the film. And again, I'm not going to give away anything too much, because like I said, if you want to watch the film, I feel like that will be giving away too much of the plot if I discuss that in detail. But beware, lots of elderly old men nudity. So aside from that, it could have been a children's film. It really could have. Another thing I thought was interesting about the film was the decision to make this kind of an all-male movie. There are no female characters in this film. You hear a character talk about his wife at one point, but we never see any women in this film. And the main characters, Pietri and his father, there is no mother. And I think that fits in with the kind of atmosphere of this village. It's in a snowy area near this mountain. It's a very hostile and rough environment. The men, they're herders and butchers, and their children are the small boys that you see in the film, are not treated like children. They're expected to be adults. They carry guns, and they're expected to help with the herding and I think the killing. Obviously they have guns, and they're expected to protect themselves from wolves, things like that. So the dynamic of the men in the village and their sons is interesting. And although I thought this was an interesting concept, this kind of darker, unique take on Santa Claus and his elves, it just felt very anticlimactic, because you kind of had this build up to this creature, these beings, these mythical beings, and that there's kind of going to be some kind of huge battle or conflict to happen, and it really doesn't. I just felt that they could have done a lot more near the end of the film, or shown us more than what we saw. So, in that sense, it was kind of a little disappointing. But overall, the acting was good. I did think the story was interesting. And it's always interesting when you see, because normally if we have horror Christmas movies that involve Santa Claus, if they're doing kind of that dark take on it, it's usually a serial killer that dresses like Santa Claus. There's not really so much of going into the mythological being of Santa Claus, and how sometimes it's kind of creepy that there's a guy who watches you all year and can come in your house when you're sleeping, and he decides if you're good or bad, that kind of thing. Like, we don't really see that as much, and I thought that was an interesting thing to see, a different take on the legend. So overall, it's not really, I don't really consider it a horror movie. It's just kind of more of a fantasy type film, but it was interesting. I did enjoy it when I watched it, except for the elderly male nudity, which was a little jarring, and I'm glad I decided not to watch that with my younger cousins, because that would have opened up a lot of interesting questions. But yeah, that was my review of Rare Exports. I gave it 6 out of 10. Definitely interesting premise, but kind of an anticlimactic ending. And as always, thank you for watching, and I hope that you have a great holiday. Thanks.